Good morning and welcome to the Lakers Lowdown. I'm Anthony Irwin. Today on the show, well, we are thoroughly in late July now. There is nothing whatsoever to talk about, but I still do have a bunch of questions here that I am going to choose from that I do believe are interesting topics to cover. There's a bunch of Austin Reaves quotes that are going around because of an appearance that he did on the All the Smoke podcast that I found interesting. A look behind the scenes at his free agency, especially, was interesting to me. So we'll get to all of that here in a bit. All right, I'm going to start with the Reeves stuff because that is the newsiest stuff. Sorry, still dealing with this tongue thing that we have to get to, and specifically the free agency aspect of it. Apparently, the market for him was obviously made complicated by the fact that he is a restricted free agent, which, again, as I've said time and time again, is an oxymoron. Restricted free agency. There's an oxymoron sitting right there. Restricted and free are both diametrically opposed words. But anyway, despite that, he did apparently have some interest out there. The San Antonio Spurs were interested in him, according to Austin Reaves. And before they signed Fred VanVleet, apparently he was getting some interest from the Houston Rockets as well. Eventually, nothing really came out of either of those situations, and the Lakers wind up signing him to a contract that is incredible value, depending on what he does in this upcoming season. I think, look, I'm not here to. This is clearly, obviously, what's going on here. This is what we heard all along. At the very onset of free agency, the Lakers made it crystal clear that they were going to match any offer and they were going to match it in the most painful ways possible for whoever was going to have their money tied up in Austin Reaves while they made that decision, or while they, after they signed that offer sheet, or if he would have signed an offer sheet with anybody, that money would have been sitting there on their books until the Lakers matched it, and the Lakers would have waited as long as they possibly could have to match it because they were operating above the cap anyway. And all that would have done is make things more difficult for that team. And as soon as that was the report, and as soon as that became the narrative throughout the league, which it was, like, there was nobody that you were talking to in league circles that at any point thought that Reaves wasn't going to be back with the Lakers. And unfortunately, that made it really difficult for Austin to maximize his earning potential this last summer. And it's still, I'm not going to sit here and lose any sleep over the fact that this guy is now worth upwards of $60 million. He's done fine. He will do fine. He has another contract after this where he can really cash in, depending on what he does on this current contract. And everybody kind of moves forward. But those teams it made sense. Houston wanted some more ready-made talent to surround their young core with this upcoming season, and they did that with some interesting decisions. I don't know how that VanVleet contract is going to age, and I certainly don't know how that Dillon Brooks contract is going to age. I understand their interest in Reaves, where he is just older, enough than their current core to kind of bridge that gap as they all get ready to start really competing. And I understand why they would have interest in Reaves. Also, he's a really good basketball player. And then for San Antonio, Reaves is a perfect fit for the stuff that Pop likes to run, what they're going to need from their ball handlers and backcourt players with Wemby. Totally makes sense there. And then also, and this is where I was kind of surprised, I thought, because San Antonio never had any real intention to fill their cap space with players next year utilizing free agency. I thought they would use that cap space to stick it to the Lakers. This was something that, again, in league circles, a lot of people thought that San Antonio would eventually, I think everybody knew that as the offseason wore on, eventually San Antonio was going to rent out that cap space, get some more assets for taking on some bad contracts, and carry out their offseason that way. But in the meantime, a lot of people thought that they would sign Austin to a contract that the Lakers would match, and then they can go about the rest of their offseason in the way that they wound up doing it. And the fact that they didn't made things obviously a little easier on the Lakers, but it did surprise a lot of people that I spoke to that thought that, yeah, the Spurs would enjoy sticking it to the Lakers specifically. And it's a good thing they didn't for the Lakers. It's unfortunate that they didn't from Austin's perspective, because that would have been a better payday coming off of a really strong season. But I think the most important takeaway here, and I probably shouldn't be at the most important takeaway 6 minutes into this monologue. The most important takeaway is that Austin doesn't seem at all upset with how things played out. I've actually maintained contact with people close to Austin throughout a lot of this, and at no point did I sense any like real frustration and annoyance with this process. They still knew they were heading towards a great payday. He got the max offer that he could get from the Lakers, and the Lakers happily made that offer to him. And then they could all kind of move forward and work together to make sure that Austin's next contract kind of makes up for what restricted free agency did to him this time around. Also, importantly from that interview, apparently he is not dating Taylor Swift, that we know of. That's what somebody dating Taylor Swift but doesn't want us to know about him dating Taylor Swift would say. Makes you think, right? All right, let's get to some questions. So the first one here comes from at Cfish35. Appreciate all the content and hard work you put in. Given your past experience covering LA sports and your relationship/friends in the LA media space, did you ever consider doing a larger LA sports coverage network for the Lakers, Dodgers, and Kings? And definitely not the Clippers. I appreciate the kind words at the top there. Yeah, to be completely honest, that was one of the things early in my career that I thought I was going to have the opportunity to do. A couple times it came up. One, when I was working when I was running Dodgers Nation, the plan there was to eventually, obviously focus on the Dodgers stuff. And then obviously I had plenty of experience at that point doing some Lakers stuff too. So those were going to be the two kind of pylons that we started with. And then we would add, I think at that time, the people I was working with wanted to do an SC thing, and they wanted to, this was before the Rams got back to LA, but it was known that they were coming. So we were getting ready to do something like that. Unfortunately, that came at the same time that the first pivot to media to video happened, and we were just kind of getting our feet underneath us at Dodgers Nation, and then we tried to pivot to video, in my opinion, too quickly, and the momentum that we were building towards just like didn't. It all just kind of ended in a fart, a wet firework. So that was the first time around. Never really got very close. Then when I was at Locked On Lakers, so Locked On Network started with just a handful of NBA teams. It was most of the big markets, and then David had some relationships in the industry with some people that he really trusted, and gave shows to. And those people earned it, and I really liked the Locked On Network in its infancy. Unfortunately, it took so long to get off of the ground that some of those voices said, "This is not this is not worth sticking around for. And they eventually moved on and were replaced. And obviously, Locked On has done some really cool stuff since. But when Locked On Lakers really started taking off, the opportunity came to me to host Locked On Dodgers. David actually came to me and asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said no at that time because it was just Locked On Lakers was this full time thing, and I just didn't want to go through building something from the ground up again. And look, Vince and Snyder, like those guys do. Jeff, I believe they do an incredible job. I remember when I was still at Locked On Lakers, we were doing shows together fairly regularly as we tried to utilize Locked On Lakers position to help that show get off of the ground. And then, I approached David and I said, well, let's do an LA thing. Let's do a Locked On LA. Was the idea that I had. And he said, well, let's hold on and see what this looks like. And I think he has actually launched some Locked On area or regional, like Locked On shows that are, kind of follow pretty closely the model that I would have pursued with doing that. So that was a second time that I wanted to do that. And again, didn't necessarily get very close. And then like the final time was most recently at Vox. Obviously we already had the infrastructure with, True Blue LA was, in my opinion, one of the best fan sites out there. Eric does an incredible job there. So we would have worked together there and done, and built some regional stuff that would have, again, it's been done. It's been successfully launched. So that was kind of the idea that I had a couple times over. And I think at this point, it's so saturated that, right now the focus is on this show and getting it back to where it needs to be. And then if we do that, then I think eventually we could do something like that. That would be fun. But yeah, for right now, it's just Lakers. It's and the other thing too is like so many of these podcasts are already spoken for. So if I did want to do something like that, like I couldn't just go and grab Eric because he's, that show has its ties already. So we'll see. Maybe one day. Doubt it, but maybe one day. All right, next question here comes from at Joey Lasagna 1. If you had to ballpark it, what does Vando's next contract look like / do the Lakers pay it? That's an interesting question. I was thinking about this a lot. So I asked for questions this morning, and the questions that we did get, I spent a lot of time thinking about over the course of the day. I'm now recording at like 9:30 my time. This one was like his really bugged me all day. I'm not gonna lie. This was a really tough one because on one hand, Vando is still the Lakers' best perimeter defender. Maybe you can make an argument for Gabe Vincent depending on what he brings there. Maybe Austin Reaves like takes a step forward. I guess the Lakers want to put him on the Caruso diet, right? I don't know. I don't necessarily see it. Max is in his second year, and I do think he's eventually going to be a good defender, but I'm a little nervous to put that kind of responsibility on him. So yeah, it's probably going to be Jared Vanderbilt that the Lakers, use to put on the Devin Bookers of the world, Bradley Beal in that same matchup, Steph Curry, and De'Aaron Fox, I guess, in the same division. And then, you kind of build it out from there. And the problem is, though, like we don't know what kind of offensive player Jared Vanderbilt is going to be. And in the NBA, a lot of times players now are kind of defined by what they cannot do. And we've seen really good defenders kind of slip through the league and never really get the full opportunity that they maybe should just based off of defensive talent because teams will so happily ignore that player and gum up your offense because of that player. And yeah, there are lineups that maybe you have enough spacing to make up for that with Vanderbilt. But if your best perimeter defender just has to stand in the corner and get ignored, that makes it really difficult to operate offensively. So um, I I would like to say that he's like a $8 to $10 million a year player. I would probably say, and if he does come in at that number, I do think the Lakers would probably happily sign him to something in that range. But I also think that if he doesn't show enough improvement from last year, that the Lakers have enough wings on their team where they'll just kind of say like, "Sorry, man, like learn to shoot or learn to finish." It's not just like I know a lot of times we think of 3 and D players as it's the two parts, the three and the D, but you need to be like respectable somewhere. You have to have a decent floater game from like 5 feet and in. You have to be able to quickly catch and go up and finish. You have to look like fairly confident at the free throw line if you get put there. And right now, that just is like isn't the case with Jared. So until that changes, I'm really curious what his role is going to look like this year because the Lakers have so many players who play his position that like Torian Prince is going to help space the floor. He's not going to get after it defensively in the same way that Jared Vanderbilt will. But for the Lakers, when you have AD and when you have LeBron, and if Reaves takes a step forward defensively, and if Rui is the defender that we saw him showcase in the playoffs last year, if like that's who he is, then yeah, the minutes for Vando do kind of like go away quickly. So, look, from everything I've heard, he's working on all of the shots that he needs to focus on, and I think people around him are optimistic that he's going to come in and look significantly better offensively than he did when we last saw him. Because if not, this is not the roster to like have that glaring a hole in your game. All right, the next one here comes from M. Christie Muse. In the best possible outcome, how much do we see of Jalen Hood-Schifino this season? Should the Lakers push him to contribute right away, or is the focus strictly on developing him? To that, chances is he is the backup point guard heading into next year. I wish I was higher on Hood-Schifino after seeing him play in Summer League. And yeah, it's Summer League, and we've seen guys just kind of like not really impress their rookie year there and then eventually grow a little bit from there. I'm not saying that like I am completely out on the guy, but any notion of him helping this year I think is probably overstated, overly optimistic for him. For one thing, at his position, you have Gabe Vincent, who they just signed. You have D'Angelo Russell, who they just re-signed. Maybe Russell eventually gets moved and you get some minutes opening up there. But as it stands right now, you have Vincent, Russell, and Reaves, who are going to take the vast majority of the minutes, all of the minutes basically at Fino's position. And that makes it really tough. And then, ahead of him, you have either Max Christie or Cam Reddish, both of whom are more ready to participate in NBA games right now. So, yeah, the draft pick, I get it. I understand why they would have liked him. He's very much the archetype that like Rob Pelinka specifically likes, right? He likes those kind of bigger combo guards who flash some stuff on the ball. The problem is like there just isn't really an opportunity for him, short of any kind of injuries. And look, injuries are going to happen over the course of the year, and maybe that opens up some time for him during those stretches where they're a little short rotation wise. But I think this is like, unless something really bad goes wrong, uh, he is probably just going to spend most of his time in the G League this year, and he's really going to focus on developing, and he'll have a probably pretty similar season that to what Christie had last year, where uh, you'll see him and you'll see how you feel about him, and then going into next summer, hopefully he looks better in that setting, and you look to build on it so that like next year you're more comfortable giving him more minutes. But yeah, as of right now, I don't really see the opportunity for him to really help them this year. But I'd love to be proven wrong. This is the thing for all of these guys. I if I'm low on a player, I really hope that I'm wrong. But as of right now, like this is a lot more about the players ahead of him in the rotation than it is about him, the player he is right now. All right, at Dad Sports Tweets writes, "What's the ideal rotation going to look like for the Lakers in the regular season, given what is on the roster currently?" So we are not we are not taking into account whichever center they add. All right, I think your starting lineup is Gabe, Vincent, Reaves, Rui, LeBron, and AD, and then Russell comes in for one of Reaves or Vincent. And then I think Prince comes in for LeBron. And then I think you have some choices here, right? Where you can, you bring in Vando depending on the matchup there for defense, and whichever guard didn't sub out first, you put Vando out there for. Eventually, AD is going to have to sit. I do know that they like to play him for most of the first quarter. Maybe they do that, or if they decide to like have him sit a little earlier, then I guess you have Hayes coming in. But if Hayes is coming in, then I think LeBron has to get ready to check in with Hayes, because I don't think you don't want your front court to have neither of LeBron or AD in there. And so I think at that point, like, LeBron comes in for Rui, and then you now it just becomes how much of the rotation LeBron or Ham wants to go into, right? So if Ham says he wants a 10-man rotation, then there might be some times where LeBron and AD are sitting and you have a whole bench unit out there. We know that Ham likes to do that, as annoying as that can sometimes look. In which case, a bench group, and this is kind of why I want Russell with the second unit, because I think he's creative enough, and certainly more creative than Gabe Vincent. So there you would have Russell, and I guess you could have Vando, and you would have Prince, and you would have, who am I forgetting? I guess maybe Max. Yeah, you could have Max. So D'Lo, Max, Vando, Prince, and Hayes would be like your all bench lineup that plays 3 minutes tops together, maybe on either half, if that, and then you just kind of fill in the gaps from there. But I one thing that is pretty apparent in carrying out that exercise, and I probably should have written more of that down, but one thing that is very apparent in carrying out that exercise is how badly the Lakers probably need another big. And look, they know it. As I've said all along, they've had offers out to both Biyombo and Wood. And as soon as they don't get either of those guys, they'll move on to like JaMychal Green or Maybe they bring back Tristan Thompson, or maybe they bring back Wenyan Gabriel. But yeah, at some point they're going to be adding another big, and whenever that happens, like we'll kind of see what that does to the rotation, and which big they bring in is going to really impact stuff because like I when I was doing that a second ago, I was thinking like, all right, how can I minimize the damage that Hayes can do? You don't have to worry about that so much if Christian Wood is the one coming off of your bench, right? And if you don't get Wood, same goes for Biombo. Like I'm not if Biombo is out there on the court, I'm not going to be sitting there like sweating out the Biombo minutes. But I do think, especially early in the year, while Hayes is still working with the development team and still working to understand what the Lakers are expecting of him in various situations, I am going to be sweating out those Jackson Hayes minutes. So, yeah, whenever the Lakers bring that player in, and whoever that player might be is obviously going to impact this stuff. But as I just did that exercise a second ago, it does really highlight the need for that guy and whoever that guy might be. The other thing too is, as I was carrying out that exercise, the Lakers have so many wings. Like I didn't even mention Cam Reddish there. At some point, like he did sign as a favor to Clutch, and Clutch is going to be hoping that he can, rehab his image. He's going to be asked to fit in there somewhere. And I think one thing that we're probably going to see a lot of here from the Lakers are going to be like, whereas we saw last year a whole bunch of multi small guard lineups, I think one of the things that's really going to define this year is going to be how many multi-wing lineups the Lakers throw out there. And the versatility and the switchability of those lineups is something I'm really looking forward to. And, that would mean that, a lot of Vando and a lot of Torian Prince and maybe more of Vando and Rui minutes than we got last year. And, I know Rob Pelinka has talked a little bit about, the two big lineups. And some of that is going to be matchup dependent. But if the Lakers are going to be a wing team, and I think they are going to be one, then that means a lot of like AD at the 5, because when he's at the 4, unless he really slims down, he's not really much of a wing. When the Lakers won a championship, he was like a supersized wing. But like last year, when he was a little bit more plotting and stuff like that, he's not so much a wing. So it's a lot of this rotation, like I said a second ago, is going to be dependent on the player that they bring in, if that is Christian Wood. And it still looks like it's going to be Christian Wood. And if it isn't Christian Wood, then what the rotation looks like is probably going to have a lot to do with what Anthony Davis looks like heading into training camp. If he is slimmed down, then you could really do some interesting stuff with the number of wings that you have at your disposal. If he gets so slimmed down that you want to consider him a wing again, which would be super exciting because I think that's the best version of Anthony Davis. But if not, and if the Anthony Davis that we see next year is closer to the one that we saw last year, then he is again going to play only the 5. And maybe occasionally you get LeBron in there as your like pseudo small forward, but for the most part, he's going to be a power forward. Rui is going to alternate between 3 and 4. Vando is going to alternate between 2 and 3. I don't think we're going to get very many Vando with the 4 minutes anymore. And then, Torian Prince is going to alternate between the 2, 3, 4. I think they're really going to look at him a lot more flexibly just to make sure that they can get his shooting on the court. And then, the nice thing about your 3-guard group heading into next year is that they can all play both together and with whoever is behind them. So, like Austin can play with Max, and Max can play with, or Cam Reddish can play with Gabe Vincent, and obviously D'Lo can play with either Gabe or Max, and those 3 guys are all, they can all kind of come and go and make it work all together. In terms of those 2 spots, I don't think we're going to get very many minutes of those 3 guys out there together. I hope not, to be honest. because that would really limit the number of things you can do with all of the wings on the roster. But if they do choose to do that, the nice thing about that, like going that kind of small, is that because all three of those guys can shoot, you're actually getting the benefit of going that small. So, yeah, I think the rotation, some of it is going to be matchup dependent. Some of it is going to be like identity dependent and AD dependent. And then obviously, like whoever they brings in here with that 14th roster spot is also going to impact some stuff. So yeah, we'll see what all of this winds up looking like. But I do hope that like the macro takeaway of me talking about all of those minutes and about that rotation is just how versatile this roster could potentially be. Whew. All right. That is going to do it here for this episode of the Lakers Lowdown podcast. Thank you, everybody, for those questions. Again, if you have a question or a topic that you want covered, the best way to do so and make sure that that topic gets covered is by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. Short of that, obviously, I'll ask for questions every so often on Twitter. So if you want to live dangerously, if you want to gamble a little bit, you can ask those questions there. And then, yeah, we have a fun week of shows at some point here, probably relatively soon. We're going to start taking a step back and maybe not do this every single weekday. But so long as I have stuff to talk about, man, I like hopping on here and talking to you. So that's what we're going to do. So until the next time you guys hear from me, I'm Anthony Irwin saying have a good one.